Thank you. Really glad to be here and make this talk. I would say I was called upon to do the talk by Kent back in the spring, but actually I volunteered. I'm like, can I do a talk? So the talk is McNeil's Partisan Rangers and the Most Brilliant Exploit of the War. And this is a slide I got from my friend Luana when I listened to her talk about the Osage Indians. It's the notice of copyright, so some of what I give is going to be from others, and it's fair use. So the presentation is proprietary, confidential, and no authorized distribution is permitted. So the talk is about the McNeil's Partisan Rangers. The founder was John Hanson McNeil, who was born in 1815, Hardy County, Virginia, now West Virginia. He was the founder and original captain of the McNeil Partisan Rangers. He died November 10th, 1864, Harrisonburg, Rockingham County, Virginia. It's not clear how he died as a result of a gunshot wound, and part of it was perhaps friendly fire, and no one ever took credit for it, took blame for it, but that's mostly what they think. General Phil Sheridan, who we all know about, he described John Hanson McNeil as the most daring and dangerous of all the bushwhackers in this section of the country. The interesting thing about that quotation, though, is that Sheridan had only come east in April 1864, and for the first 4 months of his time in the east, he was attached to the Army of the Potomac. And he only assumed command of the Army of the Shenandoah on August 7th. So he came to this conclusion within 2 months of being aware of McNeil. I'm asked all the time, how did I happen upon this story? So a lot of you, like me, are interested in genealogy. Hans McNeil's mother-in-law was a VanMeter. So the individuals who are highlighted in yellow, they are Jesse McNeil. So Jesse was the son of Hans. These are Jesse's great-great-grandparents, and they are also among my 5 great-grandparents. So he's tied in. I think he's a 3rd cousin, 3 times removed. And one of my 4 great-grandfather was Isaac Cunningham, and he was closely related to the William Cunninghams, who are in this line as well. So when you do genealogy, of course, you go up, you do your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, but then you can also take those people and start looking at uncles and aunts and taking their lines back down to the present day. So that's how I happened upon the story, was I was up doing research in the South Branch Valley, and South Branch Valley, this is taken from Oldfields, which is 5 miles north of Moorefield, and I'm sure some of you are like, what in the world are you talking about? Where is this place? Well, here's where it is. The South Branch Valley is the first valley to the west of the Shenandoah Valley. It's comprised of, from north to south, Hampshire, Hardy, Pendleton, and Highland counties. And after 1863, only the latter county, Highland County, is still in Virginia. So Hampshire, Hardy, and Pendleton are now in West Virginia. So the McNeil family start off in Moorefield, and you can see from this map that Moorefield is in, well, it depends on if you think the panhandle of West Virginia is 3 counties or 8. You know, if it's the 3 counties that are closer to Washington, then it's not in the panhandle. But if it's the 8 counties, then it is in the panhandle. So in 1838, they moved to Bourbon County, Kentucky. Part of that was that there was the Panic of 1837. A lot of families are moving out of Hardy County, moving out of South Branch Valley. They're moving west. This family moves west. This is where they settled. They settled in Bourbon County, Kentucky, between Clintonville and Stony Point. I don't think it's an accident that they settle in Bourbon County, because there were a number of their closely related VanMeter and Cunningham relatives lived close by in Clark and Bourbon. They moved back in 1844 They moved back to Moorefield. They're there for 2 more years, then they moved back, then they moved west again. They moved to Columbia, Missouri, then they moved to Davis County in 1855, which is in the northwest corner of Missouri, as shown by this map. For those of you who are maybe wondering about this, if I can figure this out on my notes. Well, I looked up to see whether or not the McNeils had enslaved persons. In 1840 in Bourbon County, they owned 6. In 1850, they're in Missouri, they owned 5. And in 1860, the last census where slavery was still legal, they owned one person. So they were not big slave owners. Okay, let's see. So with the outbreak of the war in 1861, Hans McNeil, he raised a Davis County volunteer company, which included sons William, George, and Jesse. George and Jesse had both been born in Bourbon County. George in 1839 and Jesse in 1841. They fought at Booneville, Carthage, Wilson's Creek, and Lexington. At Lexington, son George was killed while on picket duty, and Hans was wounded. William returned after that. He goes back to Davis County Farm. While recovering at Columbia, Hans and Jesse are captured, and they're imprisoned at St. Louis. June 15th, 1862, father and son, they both escaped from the prison in St. Louis. They head back to Virginia. Okay. The Confederate Partisan Ranger Act was the act that authorized the establishment of partisan ranger units. It was enacted due to public pressure across the South by newspaper editors, publishers, and the like. They called for the Confederate government to utilize guerrilla warfare in addition to regular army forces. It was opposed by the regular military authorities like Generals Joe Johnston, Henry Heath, Robert E. Lee. It was opposed by the Secretary of War because they believed it tended to encourage desertion and poor morale in the regular army, and would encourage avoidance of duty in the regular army, and it would promote looting, plunder, and lawlessness. But you can see that, hopefully you can see from the act, that the partisan rangers would be regularly received into service. They were entitled to the same pay, rations, and quarters. In addition, that for any arms and munitions of war captured from the enemy, they would get paid by the quartermaster for the full value of the items recovered. So that was a bonus to encourage this. And the other thing about it is, because they wanted to have guerrilla operations, if they were under the control, so to speak, of the regular army, they could be treated as regular soldiers and then perhaps not be subject to summary execution when they were captured. So this is from a book, The Guerrilla War Principles by James Ramage, that he wrote about John Hunt Morgan. So this is what guerrilla fighters tended to do. Employed offensive hit and run, attack with superior numbers, withdraw to avoid decisive battle, acquire accurate intelligence, use local civilians as informers or guides, stalk and harass the enemy, destroy enemy communications, force the enemy to disperse its strength, use night to surprise, use treachery and deception, break the rules as necessary to win, and exercise self-preservation. So as I've done research into the McNeil Partisan Rangers, they did all of this. In May 1862, so right after the Partisan Ranger Act is approved, John M. Bowdoin, who was an artillery officer, is called upon to establish a partisan unit west of the Blue Ridge. This is his ad, which is right out of the Richmond paper. It's very difficult to read, but basically he's promising regular pay plus full value of arms and munitions captured. Then he says, quote, "I don't propose to rely much on military science, but mainly on great celerity of movement." Celerity means swiftness. Sleepless vigilance, good marksmanship, and plenty of old-fashioned rough fighting and bushwhacking to make the country too hot to permit a Yankee to show his head outside of his camp. I therefore want men who will march all night, sit behind a tree all day, for the chance of a good shot at a Yankee with a double-barreled shotgun. I desire all who can to bring the best arms they have, shotguns, rifles, pistols. We will try to get better ones hereafter. Also, one good suit of clothes with a change of underclothing, and one good blanket. Mounted men will furnish their own horses. This is a map from 1862 that was published by the North to show the theater of war. This shows almost the entire Virginia and Maryland theater of war where the partisan Rangers operated. Mosby's Confederacy is, I don't have a, I did bring a pointer. So anyway, Mosby's Confederacy is this area right here. It's east of the Blue Ridge. The next over is the Shenandoah Valley, and then the next over, that's the South Branch Valley. So, from west to east, these are the partisan commanders, John Hanson McNeil, Harry Gilmore, and John Singleton Mosby. So the main source of concern, both for the Union and for the Confederacy operating in this area of northern Virginia, western Virginia, Maryland, was the B&O Railroad. And the reason it was so important, as you can see from this map of the railroads in the north, is obviously there's lots of railroads in Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, but because they had to come across the mountains, there were really only three ways across. One was through Pennsylvania, and then one was the B&O, and the B&O is the yellow highlighted, and there was two branches of the B&O. So the northern branch came from Wheeling, the lower branch came from Parkersburg, and then they all kind of fed back into Baltimore and Washington, D.C. So you can see where if they want to take their supplies and troops from the west and get them to the Eastern Theater of War, the B&O Railroad is very, very, very important. So, McNeil's unit was formed in 1862, but they really don't get going until 1863. In 1863, McNeil, he proposed a raid on the bridge at Grafton, West Virginia, over the Tiger Valley River. This bridge had been completed in 1854. It had taken 5 years to complete. It was the pride and joy of West Virginia, as you can see on the seal of the governor. The bridge in the background with the train, that's the bridge at Grafton. So they're very proud of it. The picture on the left is from a flood in 1864 that damaged the bridge and basically necessitated its repair. But McNeil had the plan. What he wanted to do was take 600 troops, ride into Grafton, and destroy with dynamite and destroy the bridge. All good. Well, the problem was it gets approved initially, but then General William Grumble Jones, he hackjacked the plan, and he decided that we're going to increase the number and the scope. So he took 3,000 men. They go into Western Virginia to try to destroy bridges, capture supplies, cattle, capture prisoners. They did a lot of that, but they did not destroy the bridge. So the Grafton Bridge stayed in effect until it was replaced after its 1884 flood. Now, in February of 1864, the Confederate government, they repealed the Partisan Ranger Act. It was due to the complaints of Southern civilian and military authorities. So the things that they thought would happen did happen. It was an impediment to recruitment of the regular army. It lowered the morale in the regular army because they were envious of lighter discipline and profit opportunity, and it caused desertions. There were commission of depredations on the southern populace, and defiance of regular command by the partisan commanders, including John Hanson McNeil defied Rosser, he defied Imboden. When they told him to do something he didn't think was right, he didn't do it. So the bill abolishing the partisan Ranger Corps was left discretionary with the Secretary of War to assign them to such military organization as in the interest of service may require. And there were only 2 units that were accepted, and that was Mosby and McNeil. So this map is maybe a little simpler and shows the location of Moorfield, which was more or less the basis of where the McNeil operated out of. Moorfield is the county seat of Hardy County. Just to the north is Romney, which is the county seat of Hampshire County. To the west, New Creek and Piedmont are on the B&O Railroad. Cumberland, which is going to play a large role in our story, is to the north in Maryland. And then Winchester to the east, which is in the Shenandoah Valley. So in the spring of 1864, Grant orders the destruction of Lee's sources of supply, and initially General Franz Sigel was assigned the effort in the Valley of Virginia. As he moved up the valley, and so when you read about this, when they talk about reading up, they actually are moving south because they're going up the river. And when they talk about they're going down the valley, they're actually going north. So it's kind of confusing until you get used to it. So anyway, as Sigel moves up the valley, the partisan units attack his rear area. So Mosby attacks at Martinsburg, and McNeil attacks at Piedmont, both of which you can see on this map. So these efforts caused the diversion of some of Sigel's forces, and also are credited with helping the Confederate victory at Newmarket. So these are the reports of what happened during the Piedmont raid, May 5th, 1864. And the first one is from McNeil to his Secretary of War. We burned 7 large buildings filled with the finest machinery, engines, and railroad cars. Burned 9 railroad engines, some 75 or 80 burthen cars, 2 trains of cars heavily laden with commissary stores, and sent 6 engines with a full head of steam towards New Creek. Captured the mail and the mail train and 104 prisoners of war. So I don't know how many of y'all had a train set when you were little, but you know, when you set that train going around the track with a full head of juice, what's the first thing that happened when it hit a curve? You know, it went right off, right? So that's what he does with the trains that go under a full head of steam towards New Creek. So what McNeil's report is confirmed by the report of John Garrett, who's the president of the B&O. He sends a similar report to Edwin Stanton. The interesting thing about the B&O Railroad, though, is because it was such a high priority for the federal government, whenever Mosby, McNeil, Gilmore attacked the railroad, they repaired it pretty quick. So this is what he says. During the night, we expect to have the entire road again clear and trains running regularly. Okay, so this is one of our characters in our story, General Benjamin Kelly. And this is immediately after the Piedmont raid. And what he says is, as soon as practicable, send Captain Hart with 125 or 150 men on a scout up the east side of the river to Moorfield and vicinity after McNeil. The scout will take 3 days' rations. It is not necessary for me to give Captain Hart any minute instructions. He is well acquainted in that vicinity. I will simply say, I want McNeil killed, captured, or driven out of the valley. So Kelly's job, he was the commander at Cumberland, and he was commander of the part of West Virginia that included the B&O Railroad. His job was to protect the B&O Railroad. So McNeil had long been a thorn in Kelly's side. It was so much so that in 1863, Mrs. McNeil and their two youngest children were on the B&O Railroad. They were trying to go from Ohio back to Moorefield, and Kelly had them arrested and sent back to Ohio, where they put in Camp Chase, which was a prison camp. They were ultimately released and they were permitted to go to Moorefield, but the bitterness remained. This episode is frequently cited as the motive for the plan to capture Kelly. Okay, so this is the Shenandoah Valley in 1864, and I think I've already mentioned that Grant's plan was to destroy the valley, leave sources of supply. So just as a part of that, McNeil, as she's shot in a skirmish as they're attacking a federal camp in Mount Jackson, which is, it's about halfway down the valley or up the valley. And November 10th, he dies at Harrisonburg. So while John Hanson McNeil is operating McNeil's Partisan Rangers, this is when it was formed, but these are its significant actions. December 1862, they ambushed a wagon train amidst 5 Union regiments. Now, ambushing wagon trains, that was sort of their MO. They did that all the time. And, when I read this, I'm like, why is this significant? But one of my great uncles, who was writing a history of our family, he talked about how he had written a letter to Lieutenant Isaac Welton, who was a cousin, to say what were the significant events you participated in. And Lieutenant Welton was on the raid to Cumberland that I'm going to get to, but he doesn't mention that. He says it was this wagon train, because it was a long wagon train, and Milroy had put troops at the end of it, troops at the front of it, but there were no troops in the middle of it. So of course, where do the Rangers go? They go right to the middle and destroy the wagon train. And it's destroyed before the troops on either end can get to them and stop it. So obviously the Jones-Inboden raid that I've already mentioned. In June, July 1863, they supported Lee's invasion of and retreat from Pennsylvania. They captured over 900 head of sheep, cattle, and horses that were available for the Army of Northern Virginia when they came back to Virginia out of Pennsylvania and Maryland. And then, of course, in 1864, they destroyed the railroad facilities and trains at Piedmont. McNeil's impact, he captured over 1,500 soldiers. They disrupted supply efforts of the Union Army in the South Branch and the Shenandoah Valley, capturing dozens of wagon trains, hundreds of weapons and munitions of all types, including thousands of ammunition rounds, thousands head of livestock, cattle, pigs, sheep, to help feed the regular army, and horses for the war effort. From 1863 to the end of the war, they wreaked havoc on the operations of the B&O Railroad, destroyed locomotives, railroad cars, bridges, track, machinery, and carpentry shops. And they caused the diversion of approximately 25,000 Union troops, which was the equivalent of an Army Corps, to guard the B&O Railroad. In that estimate, that's not one I made up, it's one that General Benjamin Kelly, that's what he said after the war. I will say one thing, I found a quotation in a book that was written by, it was a biography about General Kelly, written by his 3 great-grandson, and this is what he wrote. At times it seemed to the Ringolds, which was a Union cavalry unit, that General Kelly had made a deal with the rebel raiders to supply them with horses, feed, saddles, and more. The rebels fed off of what the general described as the carelessness within his ranks, to which his soldiers thought the foolhardiness of their commander sending out trains over such a distance with insufficient guard. So maybe kind of cuts against the, how good McNeil was if his opponents were bad, right? Okay, so this is Lieutenant Jesse Cunningham McNeil. This is like the most cool Confederate I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he just looks cool to me. So anyway, following the death of his father, Jesse was the likely leader, but owing to his reputation for recklessness and impetuousness, General Jubal Early, who was the commander of the area, he was hesitant to name young McNeil as captain. Plus, Jesse had severely injured his leg in early December 1864. Early instead appointed Harry Gilmore to take overall command of all irregular units in Northwest Virginia. And this was not well received by McNeil's command, and they refused to recognize Gilmore's authority. This situation resolved in early February 1865 when Gilmore was captured by a Union unit of 20 men that had been especially sent to capture him. So, the war situation in February 1865, I'm sure all of y'all know this if you thought about it. Grant's besieging Lee at Richmond and Petersburg. Sherman has completed his march through Georgia in December 1864 and is making his way north through the Carolinas to meet up with Grant. Sheridan has laid waste to the Shenandoah Valley in the fall of 1864 and is also preparing to join Grant. And then in the west, Union General George Thomas's Army of the Cumberland has routed Confederate General John B. Hood's Army of Tennessee at Nashville, and basically that's more or less the end of the war in the west. So McNeil, and he decides that now the time is right to capture the generals, specifically General Kelly. And so the important thing about this raid is I don't think it can be really understood without knowledge of the terrain, the weather, and the distances. So it's one thing to see a map, but I tried to put together triangles that show the distances involved. So Moorfield to Romney is 26 miles. Romney to New Creek, I don't have a number on that, but that's 23 miles. Romney to Cumberland is 27. New Creek to Moorfield is 32. Winchester to Moorfield is 56. But part of that is to show that if they're going to ride into Cumberland, there's significant risk to that because there's cavalry units both at New Creek and Winchester, and without complete secrecy, there's a good chance the command could be captured before returning to the south area of Moorfield in relative safety. These are his scouts. John Lynn is captured. John Lynn is asked to go in. He's a native of Cumberland. He's asked to go into Cumberland. Unfortunately, he gets captured and is sent to prison, and he never comes out. John Fay is then asked to go in. And so so my PowerPoint, I can't read my note slides over here. So, which I want to be able to read. So, McNeil sent Lynn to reconnoiter, but he's captured and spent the rest of the war in prison. Next, McNeil inquired of Fay, a Cumberland native and one of the unit's best scouts. When asked if it could be done, Fay responded, "Jesse, I think it can be done yet." So Fay and Holler's this boy up here in the upper right. I mean, look at this kid. He's 16 years old, and he was from Missouri, and he joined up. His brothers had fought in the West, and he wanted to join up. So he just gets up and leaves his home in Missouri, and goes east, and he joins up with McNeil in Pennsylvania when they were up there in 1864. So. Fay and Holler, they leave Moorfield and they reach to Brady's Mill, Maryland, which is 10 miles upriver from Cumberland. So if you can see on this map, Brady is where they go to. So they go to Brady's Mill, where they enlisted George Stanton, a B&O employee, and Samuel and John Brady to scope out Cumberland with instructions to be ready to report on the night of February 20th, 21st. Fay and Holler then recross the Potomac and go to Voss Harriet's farm. In Harriet's farm, you can see right up kind of in between Romney, Springfield, and what's called Seymour. There's arrows going to and from. So that's somebody's house. That's not a location. So these, again, are the scouts. So February 19th, after Fay and Holler leave for Maryland, Jesse leaves Moorfield. He gathers 62 men, whereas Fay had thought 25 could accomplish the task. and they go to the Hampshire County Poorhouse. You can see the Hampshire County Poorhouse is marked in yellow on this to await Fay's report. On the evening of the 19th, Holler rides through a blinding snowstorm from Harriet's to the Poorhouse with Fay's note, "Dear Jesse, I've been across the Potomac and find all okay. Meet me here Monday evening, February 20th. Holler will give you all the particulars, and the plan, if carried out, will certainly prove successful." So Harriet's is the dot that's just to the west of Hanging Rock, which is 5 miles north of Romney. The command leaves the Poorhouse on the morning of the 20th, and they proceed leisurely down the South Branch, avoiding the main roads. Upon reaching Harriet's, Jesse informs the men of the plan, giving them the chance to go to Moorfield and leave, or continuing, and they all choose to go ahead. They leave Harriet's about 8 p.m. So the initial route is across what's called the Middle Ridge, then across Patterson Creek Valley, 4 miles south of Frankfort to Short Gap on the Knobbly Mountain, about 10 miles as the crow flies. So that's the green line on this map here of Hampshire and Mineral County. So again, this is the terrain they cross, and it's not really the best to see. So Moorfield is in the lower right. The Hampshire County Poorhouse is right about in this area right here, or I don't have a good angle on this. The Harriet's there's a loop right here of the South Branch River. That's where Harriet's is, his house. The Short Gap is up here in this area. Brady's is right there below the lower slope of Wills Mountain. That's Wills Mountain right there. And then Cumberland is up here. So these are modern Google Earth. So the route in goes from Moorfield up to Romney to Harriet's, across to Short Gap, then across the river, the North Branch, and then they go up this slot through here and into Cumberland. So again, like I said, you can't appreciate this unless you understand the terrain, the distance, and the weather. So let's see, next slide. So this is kind of more the same landscape. The map on the left is looking west. So there's the hoop of the South Branch in the lower left, and that's where Harriet's is, and then they're going up to the upper right. And then this is the same map looking east. So again, on the map on the right, you can see the hoop of the South Branch, and they're leaving from there, and they're coming across the valley. They're leaving here, and they're coming across to here, where they're going to cross the Knobbly Mountain and come down into this valley, and then cross the river right in there. And then they're going to come up. This is Wills Mountain. They're going to come up like this to get into Cumberland. That's Cumberland. Okay, so writing after the war, J.W. Duffy described the sky was clear, the temperature was biting cold, and the snow in many places was banked in formidable drifts. So again, these maps are from Google Earth. So after crossing the Patterson Creek Valley, they come to Short Gap and the Knobbly Mountain. To avoid the pickets at Cresap Town, they needed to go up the Knobbly Mountain so they could descend into the Potomac Valley and cross at Seymour's Ford and then meet their informants. So all the reports are that the drifts were so deep they had to leave their horses. McNeil had command stop at Ren Seymour's on the Virginia side. He was a near relative of Isaac Welton and also known to keep a supply of bourbon. Seymour obliged the men with some canteens of, quote, brown water, but advised them to touch it lightly. Another relative, Edwin Harness, was present. When told of the mission, he opined, "I suppose I will never see you boys again. You're certain to be killed or captured." This is the view from the Knobbly Mountain looking west. So, pretty high, snowy, but not as snowy as it was that day. Here's their route in and out of Cumberland. So the green route is up the Knobbly Mountain, down into the valley of the Potomac River. They cross the river. Let's see. After crossing the river, they obtained information from Stanton and then went to Brady's house, meeting Sam and John Brady, who had been to Cumberland. Also, they had a decision point: adjust the plan and capture the pickets at Brady's mill or continue. So apparently McNeil is feeling the weight of responsibility. The men, especially Fay, want to continue, but due to the time needed to cross the Patterson Creek Valley and its ridges, the trek over the Knobbly Mountain, not to mention the stop at Seymour's, McNeil decided that Fay's original route, which is the dotted red line around the west side of Wills Mountain, up to the Narrows and down into Cumberland from the northeast, he decided that was going to take too long. So they're going to take the more direct route along the New Creek Cresaptown Road, and they also at this time they assigned the squads to perform certain tasks in Cumberland. So Sergeant Joe Van Dever is to lead 6 men to capture Crook. Sergeant Joe Kuykendall is to do the same as to Kelly. Fay and Haller are to destroy the telegraph office, and the others are to go to the government stables and grab horses. This is the same historical map, and this shows the, on the right, shows the modern topography. So they proceed up the road, McNeil and Van Diver in the lead, followed by Fay and Kuykendall and the rest of the troop behind. After 2 miles, 3 miles from Cumberland, they're stopped by a picket. The challenge: who goes there? Answer: friend, scout from New Creek. Reply: dismount, advance, give the countersign. With this, McNeil spurs his horse, charged, drew his pistol, and fired. And luckily for the sentry, the jolt of the horse caused the shot to miss. This was the only shot fired the entire night. This one right here. So with that, Kuykendall, Van Diver, and Fay come up. They disarm the sentry. The sentry had 2 companions. They attempt to run towards the railroad and the river. They're quickly captured. These 3 men are from the 3rd Ohio Cavalry, and they were threatened in order to obtain the knight's countersign. A pointed pistol to the head produced no results, but a halter around the neck did. And the countersign was the term Bull's Gap. So, first picket and countersign secured, the command continued with 3 Union cavalrymen on their own horses. So I didn't understand this at first. The 3 cavalrymen at the first picket, they took them with them into Cumberland. You know, that seems crazy to me, but that's what they did. So after a mile, they come upon the reserve picket who had not heard the pistol shot. The countersign worked, and this picket post with about 8 to 10 men, they were captured, their weapons destroyed, and they were paroled until the Rangers returned. And after the war, one of the Rangers wrote, "I suppose they're still there because we never did come back that way." Okay, so this shows the Cresaptown Road comes in from the lower left up into about the middle of what's called Ward 1. Then they get on what's called Green Street. They go in, they go down around the church. And so before tonight's program got going, you saw a painting by George. Who was that painting by?
John Paul Strange.
Right, and it showed the Rangers going past the Episcopal Church in downtown Cumberland. So that's what they all talk about. Proceeded east on Green Street, past the Episcopal Church, across the Wills Creek, and thence up Baltimore Street. The head of the column stopped at the Revere House. So Baltimore Street is between the creek and the railroad tracks, and the Revere House is almost to the railroad tracks. So this is a little clearer detail. Maybe you can see the general hotels are along Baltimore Street. So this is a period picture of downtown Cumberland. This is Baltimore Street. You can see the big building on the first big 3.5-story building on the right. That's the Revere House. That's Crook's headquarters. About halfway down is the Barnum House, or not halfway down, about a block down is the Barnum House, and you can see the church at the end of the street, and at the very end is the Wills Creek Bridge in the distance down Baltimore Street. So some of the men were wearing blue Union overcoats and some wore gray, but in the dark and haze they were indistinguishable. Some of the men joked with some of the pedestrians and soldiers in the street and whistled such Yankee tunes as they knew, including Yankee Doodle, Battle Cry of Freedom, and John's brown body lies a moldering in the grave. And I put them on my phone, but we're not going to play them, but they are kind of fun. I mean, and the other thing was that it wasn't like there was nobody out and about. There were people out and about. And so as they're coming in, they're joking with people, they're whistling their tunes, and the people like, well, we're scouts from New Creek. You know, we're the 3rd Ohio Cavalry. And, you know, no, I mean, this is such a crazy damn thing to do. I mean, it's the middle of winter. It's cold. So, okay. This is General Kelly's headquarters. It's the Barnum House. I know it says Windsor Hotel at the top, but this is the Barnum House. This is what they all say. Sprague Lynn, who's a native of Cumberland, captured and disarmed the sentinel in front of the Barnum and was quickly followed by Kuykendall, Daly, and Cunningham. They proceeded to General Kelly's apartment on the 2nd floor. The first room entered was that of the Adjutant General, Major Melvin, who was asked where General Kelly was. He replied, in the adjoining room. The communicating door being opened, it was entered at once. When Kelly was awakened, he was told he was a prisoner and to make his toilet. I don't want to know what that means. He was told to make his toilet as speedily as possible. With some degree of nervousness, he complied, inquiring as he did so whom he was surrendering. Kuykendall says, to Captain McNeil by order of General Rosser. The general had very little to say after that. In a very short time, he and Melvin were led to the street, mounted upon horses, the owners of which gave them the saddles and rode behind. At the Revere House, a similar scene was taking place. The sentinel in front was quietly captured, but the front door was locked. After knocking, it was open. Jacob Gassman, who had been a clerk in the hotel, went to where Crook slept and, supposing the door locked, rapped several times. A voice from within asked, "Who's there?" Gassman replied, "A friend," and was told, "Come in." Van Diver, Samuel Tucker, and James Daly, son of the proprietor of the hotel, arrived by this time and all entered the room. To the general, meanwhile, having half risen, Van Diver said, "General Crook, you are my prisoner." Crook, "What authority have you for this?" Van Diver, "The authority of General Rosser of Fitzhugh Lee's division of cavalry." Crook, "Is General Rosser here?" Van Diver, "Yes, I am General Rosser. I have 2,500 men and we have surprised and captured the city. This settled the matter as far as the bona fide general was concerned." So here are our victims, General George Crook, General Benjamin Kelly, and Major Thayer. So while the generals are being captured, Fay and Haller go to the telegraph office and destroyed it. Horses were taken from the government stable, including Kelly's prize stallion Philippi, which the citizens of Wheeling had given to him following his early war victory at Philippi. Several headquarter flags were brought out with General Crook, and with that, McNeil gave the order, "By fours, right about." The command proceeded back down Baltimore Street, turned left before the Wills Creek Bridge, and proceeded on to the C&O Canal Path. So this is this rendering is from a book from about 1880. I figured fair use on this. There's no copyright, right, Luana? So I figured this was fair game. So on the way out, the command was challenged by a picket force a few miles below Cumberland. Sergeant Van Diver admonished the Union troops, "Why do you stop my men when there are Johnnies about? This is General Crook's bodyguard, and we have no time to waste. The rebels are coming, and we're out to meet them." The reply, "Give them the devil, boys." So once the command reached Wiley's Ford, they let go of the 3rd Ohio pickets, whom they had picked up on the way into Cumberland. So the first set of pickets, they bring them into Cumberland, they take them out, and then they steal their horses. You know, what a bunch of great guys. So, and they give the horses to the generals and to Major Melvin. So this again is the same map I've already shown. It shows the C&O Canal Path, which is right between the river and the C&O Canal. This again is a similar map to what you've seen. The blue line is the route out down the C&O towpath to Wiley's Ford, then along the Old Furnace Road. Let's see. So here they are on the way out, and so when they cross Patterson Creek on the way to Romney, they sighted the Union troops in the rear. Passing Romney, they took the old Trough Hollow Road parallel to the South Branch. 2 miles south of Romney, the pursuers from Cumberland came within gunshot range. McNeil detached Lieutenant Wilton as a rear guard to delay the Union horsemen so that the main body could escape. They then continued until they reached the north end of the Moorfield Valley. Do you remember the picture I showed you at the very start of the valley? That's about where they were when they entered the north end of the Moorfield Valley. So instead of finding that they are home free, they spot the Union cavalry across the South Branch on the western side, and this is the cavalry that has come from New Creek to capture them or to interrupt the raid at Moorfield. But instead of proceeding south, McNeil's ordered the command to turn east onto a trail leading to the mountains. He also sent a messenger to his lieutenant in Moorfield to engage the Union cavalry until his command could get away. Crook was heard to say as the Union cavalry crossed the river, "So near and yet so far." After proceeding a few miles, the Rangers finally stopped at 4 p.m. They had been in the saddle for more than 20 hours, and they had traveled 75 to 80 miles since leaving Harrods the night before. So by the morning of the 22nd, McNeil's received reports that the federal pursuers from New Creek, Cumberland, and Winchester had all given up and returned from whence they came. So in doing the research on this, there are a number of accounts. The first account in the Richmond paper is probably attributable to Lieutenant Welton. It's published like the next 2 days later when the generals get to Richmond. There's a publication in the Valley at Harrisonburg that's published like 5 years later. John Fay, turns out he's a lawyer and a newspaper editor. He writes a number of accounts. Jesse McNeil writes an account in 1906 before he dies. A boy named, not a boy, he's a minister at that point, named Jefferson Duffy. He writes an account. So there's a number of accounts, and one of the things that I tried to do is figure out what's the most likely story. But the very first account is from the command at Cumberland, which I've put up. So what he reports to General Sheridan, he says, "This morning about 3 o'clock, a party of rebel horsemen came up the New Creek Road, about 60 in number. They captured the picket and rode quietly into town, went directly to the headquarters of Crook and Kelly, sending a couple men to each place to overpower the headquarter guard. When they went directly to the room of General Crook, and without disturbing anyone else in the house, ordered him to dress and took him downstairs and placed him upon a horse ready saddled and waiting. The same was done to Kelly. Captain Melvin, Assistant Kelly, was also taken. This was done, while this was being done, without creating any disturbance. They opened 1 or 2 stores, but they left without taking anything. It was done so quietly that others of us who were sleeping in the adjoining rooms to General Cook were not disturbed. The alarm was given in 10 minutes by a watchman at the hotel who escaped from them, and within an hour, we had a party of 50 cavalry after them. They tore up the telegraph lines. They required an hour to get them in order. As soon as New Creek could be called, I ordered a force sent to Romney. It started without any delay. Second force from New Creek to Moorfield. They, meaning the Rangers, they rode good horses and left in a very rapid rate, evidently fearful of being overtaken. They did not remain in Cumberland over 10 minutes. So, boom, they're in there and out. From all the information, I'm inclined to believe that instead of Rossard is McNeil's company. Most of the men from that company are from this place. So that's another thing that's true, is that all the boys, all the men, and the average age was about 22. They were all, I think the oldest was like 35, the youngest was 16 or 17. Most all of them were from Hardy County, Hampshire County, or Western Pennsylvania. This was General Lee's report immediately following. He's writing to John C. Breckinridge, Secretary of War. Early reports that Lieutenant McNeil with 30 men on the morning of the 21st entered Cumberland. captured and brought out Generals Crook and Kelly and an adjutant general, 2 privates, and the headquarters flag without firing a gun, though considerable force is stationed in the vicinity. McNeil and his party deserve much credit for this bold exploit. Their prisoners will read Stanton today. These are several reactions to the Cumberland raid. Some were written after the war. Charles T. O'Farrell, he was post-war governor of Virginia, fought in the Confederacy. Surely as bold and successful at achievement as any during the war, and deserves a place in every book which treats of that stormy period. General John B. Gordon, in his post-war book, one of the most thrilling incidents of the entire war. Captain William McDonald of the Laurel Brigade, an event that excited the North with astonishment at the audacity in the South, with admiration for its boldness and exultation. Robert E. Lee's dispatch I've already read. And then Stanton to General Grant. The frequent surprises in Sheridan's command has excited a good deal of observation recently. Can you excite a little more vigilance? All right, final notes. Oh, and the best, General George Crook. Gentlemen, this is the most brilliant episode of the entire war, exploit of the entire war. So after 2 nights of camping outside with their captors, the generals were taken to Harrisonburg, where they were given a hearty breakfast. This was General Crook's post-breakfast comment. They were then placed in a stagecoach and taken to Stanton, where they dined with General Early and spent a night in a hotel. I'm amazed, here we are at this war, and it's knockdown, drag out, especially at the very end. And here they are having breakfast together, they're having dinner, they're talking about the battles that have just been fought. So anyway, on the 4th, they're taken by train to Richmond and housed in Libby Prison. But within 2.5 weeks, by March 15th, the generals and Major Melvin were exchanged and back in Baltimore. Edwin Stanton wanted to muster both out, like had happened to General Edwin Stratton when he was captured by Mosby. But Grant and Lincoln disagreed, at least as to Crook. He was appointed commander of the 2nd Cavalry Division, Army of the Potomac, on March 27th. And so as a result, Crook participated in Grant's final campaign against the Army of Northern Virginia, Dinwiddie Courthouse, Five Forks, Amelia Springs, Salyers Creek, and Appomattox Courthouse. So then also, following the end of the war, Crook married Mary Daly, who was the sister of one of McNeil's men. Crook remained in the Army, went west, and was involved in the wars against the Native Americans. While his career is beyond the scope of this talk, he commanded the Southern Pincher heading out of Fort Fetterman, Wyoming Territory, on the Bighorn and Yellowstone expedition, which was to join George Custer's 7th Cavalry, which was heading west from Fort Abraham Lincoln in Dakota Territory. But following the Battle of the Rosebud, Crook decided to return to Wyoming, with the result that he did not meet up with Custer. So, how about that? Crook died in 1890 and is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Due to Kelly's absence from his post, perhaps because he was in overall command of Cumberland Garrison and thus ultimately responsible for the security lapses which led to the kidnapping, he was not reappointed to his post when the war ended. And following the war in various governmental positions, he was an internal revenue collector, head of Hot Springs Military Reservation, and an inspector of pensions. He died in 1891, and he's also buried at Arlington National Cemetery. So I'm sure you want to know what happened to Jesse C. McNeil. He was paroled at New Creek. Following the raid, General Early finally relented and appointed Jesse McNeil as captain. He surrendered at New Creek on May 5th, 1865. After the war, he married Elizabeth Sherrod. Stay with me on this. They were double second cousins because their mothers were double first cousins. So that's pretty close. The couple moved back to Missouri initially, then relocated to Illinois. They had a total of 13 children. He was a farmer. He participated in Civil War reunions, published his version of the raid in 1906, and he died in 1912. And here he is in his later years. So that's my talk. Thank you so much.